At the start of the 2010s, Splinter Cell, Metal Gear, Dishonored, Sly Cooper, Deus Ex, and even Thief were all franchises that had new titles in active development. Not all of these new entries would be bangers, but it stands that the juggernauts of the stealth genre were alive and well at the time. Cut to the start of the 2020s, and all of these franchises are effectively dead, and on top of that, they haven't really been replaced. While the turn of the century saw stealth on a podium of its own as one of the most popular video game genres, in the modern era, it's hard to name even one successful ongoing stealth franchise. How did this happen? How did we go from Metal Gear and Splinter Cell butting heads for supremacy in the early 2000s to having the only new entries on the horizon be remakes of the glory days from studios that fans have almost entirely lost hope in? One's first instinct may be to say that sneaking around just isn't something the modern gamer is interested in, but you don't have to dig very deep to disprove that. Stealth games might be MIA, but stealth as a concept isn't gone at all. In fact, it's everywhere. That is because stealth is no longer a genre, it is a feature. That is to say, that is how most AAA developers treat it. Take a look at some of the biggest games from the last couple years. Tears of the Kingdom, Elden Ring, Spider-Man, Horizon. None of these are stealth games, but all of them allow you to sneak into an enemy zone and take out bad guys from behind. In the old days, genres were more clearly defined. Shooters were shooters, puzzle games were puzzle games. Obviously, we had our exceptions, but given the relative youth of the medium and the rapidly advancing technology around it, we had a lot of different studios trying out a lot of different things. Now we live in the era of player agency. A lot of games want to give the player the option to play however they want with a wide variety of simpler systems as opposed to zeroing in on one. Franchises that might have once put out linear action-adventure titles or shooters now let you customize character builds down to the stat percentage. That's not a bad thing. A lot of fantastic games fall into that category, but it has led to a sort of sameness within the AAA side of the industry. That by no means accounts for all games. Deeply focused experiences like Devil May Cry or Monster Hunter are still as good as ever, but that focus hasn't applied to stealth lately. Instead, the open-world game with a helping of sneaking and stabbing on the side has become the norm. Even Hogwarts Legacy has you sneaking around camps and knocking out goblins, and that is one of the best-selling games of all time. People still want to be able to sneak around, obviously, since pretty much every game lets you do it, whether you're a superhero, a wizard, or a hunter of robot dinosaurs. But the problem lies in an unwillingness to commit to specific ideas and mechanics. In fact, it is amazing how a game set in the world of Harry Potter and a game where you play as a disgraced samurai turned vigilante can have nearly identical gameplay loops. And that's where the next issue comes in. Stealth has become overly homogenized. This is what Metal Gear Solid looked like in 2001. This is what Splinter Cell looked like in 2002. This is what Assassin's Creed looked like in 2007. This is what all of them looked like in the mid-2010s. How you present stealth in the context of a video game is something that a lot of studios used to interpret in different ways. But now, you'd be hard-pressed to find a stealth experience that isn't about sneaking into a camp using waist-high cover and tall grass to hide. That's certainly not to say all these games are the same. Metal Gear Solid 5 may have a lot of the same components as AC Valhalla, but one of them has some of the greatest stealth mechanics of all time, and one of them doesn't have a working detection system. But the point at hand is that when people reach a consensus on how a stealth game is supposed to look, it leads us right back to that idea of turning it from a genre into a feature. If crouch and cover mechanics are what make a stealth game, then you can just stick them into your open-world RPG or your cinematic, story-based experience without giving them any more depth. This has always been how the world of gaming kind of works. The AAA space likes to settle on certain common denominators. FPS games now all share similar controls, third-person shooters practically require an over-the-shoulder camera, and every other company seems to want to remake Dark Souls these days. Similarly, stealth has settled into its own mold. AAA games rarely tried to innovate in the world of stealth like they used to. The predatory stealth of Arkham Asylum or the social stealth of Assassin's Creed don't have to be to your specific taste for you to see that stealth used to be a lot more mechanically diverse from game to game than it is today. Interestingly, the only AAA stealth IP from the old days that is still standing is arguably Hitman, and that franchise actively discourages crouch and cover stealth in favor of killing in broad daylight. It's one of the few franchises doing something different from the norm in stealth, and it has done so to much acclaim. Indie games also put out unique and interesting stealth experiences all the time. Whenever you feel like a type of game is dying, you can be sure a small developer out there is capitalizing on that nostalgia. But for whatever reason, the companies funding AAA games don't see stealth as a genre worth exploring from a creative perspective. That is another interesting factor. Companies don't know how to sell stealth. Let's take a look at the trailers we were getting for the last Splinter Cell game 11 years ago. Blacklist has action, but it is a solid stealth game in its own right, and yet you might not know that from the marketing alone. There just aren't a lot of video game trailers where an assassin skulks in the shadows. Instead, how many Assassin's Creed reveal trailers involve your hooded protagonist throwing down with a literal army without taking a hit? Stealth is a style of play that AAA companies know people want and will continue to put into games, and yet they don't seem to feel like it's something that can sell on its own. And to be fair, maybe they're not totally wrong. In a world where stealth was once a dominant genre, of the top 50 best-selling games of all time, none of them are pure stealth games. Even the relatively successful Hitman was dropped by Square Enix when it failed to meet whatever standards they had in place. Splinter Cell Blacklist, a game that was significantly more action-heavy than previous titles, sold only 2 million copies, a stark contrast to the 15 million of Assassin's Creed 4, which came out the same year. So yeah, stealth on its own is definitely a niche genre, now more than ever, and it's easy to feel like big companies will never want to make a pure stealth game again. But at the same time, I felt the same way looking at turn-based games in Western markets not so long ago, and that is only one example, but it's nice to see games like a Dragon and Octopath Traveler making sure that this now niche style has a home outside of Japan, even if they don't put up Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty numbers. That all leads me to my last point here. I'm not worried about stealth games. Yeah, as a big stealth fan, it sucks that they aren't really around anymore, but I firmly believe they will be back. You can call that copium, but trends in the world of video games come and go all the time. Once it felt like all FPS games would be beige military shooters forever, but we grew out of that, and now we have a ton of visually and mechanically unique games in the genre. Horror games felt like they'd never be scary again, but that came back with a vengeance too. Likewise, this era of just tacking on a hide-in-tall-grass mechanic to an action game is not going to last forever. Stealth is out of fashion now, but eventually a company will commit to making a great stealth game that is just allowed to be a stealth game, and that is where the real questions lie. Who is going to get that ball rolling, and how long will it take? Maybe it'll be one of the Splinter Cell or Metal Gear remakes. More likely it'll be something entirely new, but we just have no way of knowing right now. But while I think it is fair to acknowledge the ways in which stealth has been streamlined and forgotten about, I didn't make this video to come into this with a doomer mindset. We know the genre can thrive if given a chance, and in all likelihood, a game will come along that revolutionizes sneaking around in video games, leading to an avalanche of copycats until it all gets homogenized and we start the process all over again. It's just how things tend to go. And that is what engaging in popular culture tends to be about. You take the stuff that resonates with you and you leave the rest. AAA stealth kinda sucks right now, but I'm willing to stick to my old copies of Splinter Cell and my indie games for now, and I will be ready for the genre's inevitable resurgence, whatever that may look like. That is all I have for today. I love stealth games, and I'd happily chat more about them in the comments. I know what videos I want to make in the future, but I am always open to suggestions if there are certain things that you want me to talk about. But in any case, do have a great day, and take care of yourself.